Happy Father's Day to everyone in the room.
They don't seem to be any more awake than the 9 o'clock service yet.
Seriously. Good morning.
They need a bouncy chair like this. That'll get them ready to go.
Notice mine's a lot
This
higher
chair
than last time.
scares me when I sit in it.
Oh, 9 o'clock service. It's like my chin was on the table. This is so much better. So much better. But thank you again for joining us this morning. I do want to take a quick moment, too, and thank Dr. Dan Flanagan, our district superintendent, for assisting with the baptism this morning. If you're a first-time visitor or a long-time visitor and didn't recognize the stranger who just walked up and blessed that child, it's legit. He's got the paperwork to prove it. But we want to thank him for that, so thank you for joining us, Dan. But also, Brad and Mike and I want to take a moment to just spend some time with you today and talk about the scripture that was shared and maybe how it relates to fatherhood, being Father's Day, all of us being fathers. And the primary takeaway from the scripture was the sense of following and imitating. Paul's talking to the church at Corinth and say, follow Christ as I have followed him as well. And we thought, what a great parallel to fatherhood, because as any father knows, your children listen to everything that you say, follow every instruction, agree and never complain.
What kind of kid do you have?
My child is 2.
She can.
And she's just learning the word no, so I've got about 3 more days before it kicks in. But all seriousness here, we do think that there's a great parallel there to following. And what better illustration to use than that time-honored treasure of the family vacation. It is summertime. If you're like me, my family would all pile into the station wagon in the summertime, literally a station wagon, and drive halfway across the country or whatnot. I'll just say they are memories. They're not all good memories necessarily, but they're memories. But we thought we would use that as an illustration for what we share today. And so I just want to just dive right in and talk about when you plan a trip, what are some of the things that you do right now? Before you plan that trip, the first thing you really have to figure out is, where am I going to sit? Or more importantly, where are the kids going to sit? Now, growing up, it was just my brother and I, so it was pretty easy to say, well, you're going to sit here, you're going to sit there. But for families with multiple kids, it can be a headache. I don't want to sit there, I want to sit there, they're looking out my window. So the first thing you got to do is just figure out the seating chart. Who's going to sit where, and really how long is that going to last? But after you do that, you're probably going to Google a map or Google some directions for where you want to go. I don't know if anybody really uses those old folding maps anymore. We use those a lot, but maybe you Google the directions. But along the way, you're going to want to sync up your GPS. Now, I don't use a GPS. I use a DPS, a dad positioning system. Did you get it? Because
the women were actually figuring out and trying not to laugh too hard next to their husbands on Father's Day and all.
The guys must be golfing today, so that's fine. The dad positioning system. I don't need some computer to tell me where to go. I know where I'm going. I know what direction I need to take and go from there. Next thing you want to do is look for some rest stops or some hotels or maybe some restaurants or gas stations along the way, because depending on how far you go, you may have to stop to eat or refill with gas or maybe spend the night. You might want to identify some tourist stops or some sights to see along the way, unless you're like some of those families who just travel in the middle of the night and you don't get to see anything. But finally, you should probably prepare, even with all the GPS or DPS technology, probably prepare to get lost and ask directions. So those are things that I would do, at least, if I was going to take a trip here in Nebraska and whatnot. But I think it's a great way to consider someone who is about to start this path of a walk with Christ. We talk about follow, do everything for the glory of God. And, there are some folks today who are with us. Maybe this is your first time trying to decide, is this really a path I want to get on? Is this Jesus guy somebody I want to follow? Some of us may be on the path and, just need some tweaks along the way. But I do want to take a second and kind of parallel, again, some of those steps that you would take in an earthly visit. And then how can we do that to start following Christ? So first thing you want to do is figure out what seat to sit in. When we first start following Christ, most of us, I think, are in the driver's seat. We know where we're going. We know what direction we should take. And, Jesus is somewhere in the car. But when we choose to really follow the path of Christ, we need to get out of that driver's seat maybe in the passenger seat, maybe in the back seat, but let him take the wheel. Let him guide the vehicle down the road. So let's make sure that we're in the right seat to begin with, because that's where your trip really starts. But once you've done that, let's find something that can help guide you. GPS, maybe, DPS, maybe. But really, in a walk with Christ, use prayer. Or maybe other Christians around you. Use these individuals and these things to help guide you on your path. When you're getting started at first, it's easy to get distracted and get off. Maybe you start wandering down one path or another. Prayer can help keep you centered. Others can help keep you centered as well. Hebrews 12, 1-3 talks about being surrounded by this group of people. It says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith." And that's really what it's about, setting our sights and getting on that right path. So you've done that. You're on the path, but let's make sure you stay aligned. Am I aligned in the way I should be going? What are my behaviors? What are the things that I'm doing? What are the things that I'm saying? What are the things I'm exposing myself to? Are those in alignment with Christ and his love? Maybe not. If you are doing something or saying something or watching something or consuming something and you realize, if this showed up in my family's Christmas letter, is that something I'm really going to want people to know about? You might want to tweak some behaviors. Make sure you get aligned. I know growing up, my dad always used to say, before I would leave the house, keep your nose clean. Now, as a kid, I hated that because I'm thinking, you clearly don't trust me. And quite frankly, when you're 12, 13, 14, your dad is a complete idiot. But, he's gotten a lot smarter over the past 20 years or so. I don't know how that happened. He must have been taking some classes. But he said, keep your nose clean. And it wasn't because he didn't trust me, but it's because he wanted to make sure I remembered every time I left the house that I was operating and living in alignment, not just with the Word of God, but also with our family as well. So you've gotten to the right seat. You've found some items to help guide you. You're moving in alignment with God's Word. Make sure you identify some places or people then that you can go for rest or support or nourishment. Contrary to what some folks think, when you become a Christian, life does not necessarily get easier. Some things will get easier, that's for sure. But life can actually get a little harder because you are committing yourself to a lifestyle that the world says is not the right way. So identify those places or people. Maybe it's a small group. Maybe it's a worship experience. Maybe it's friends or family, again, who can circle around you and help give you the support and the nourishment that you need when you have those rough days, because they are going to come, and they will come again and again at times. Now, as you do that, you want to, again, identify some tourist spots, identify some things along the way that you want to enjoy and experience. Don't just get on this Christian path, head down 0 to 60 on the way to the end. That's not what it's about. There are things that God puts in our life for us to enjoy. And especially as followers of Christ, the things that we can enjoy become so much more beautiful. And so take the time on your path to enjoy those things. Now, I've got a friend who, the not-so-innocent will remain nameless, in case there are any law enforcement officers in the room. He says to me that he can drive from his home here in Omaha to Kearney in 2 hours. Now, based on the response, I'm guessing most of the people can do that too, actually. There was no gasp of shock. I can't do that for I guess. And he averaged, I won't say what the average miles per hour is, but he's pushing it. It's 0 to 60. He goes from Omaha to Kearney, no questions asked. That's not what God calls us to do on our walk. Enjoy the world around us. Following Christ isn't a race just to see how fast you can get somewhere. Now finally, when you're preparing a trip here on earth, you probably want to prepare to get lost and ask a few questions. Same goes for our walk with Christ. Prepare to stumble and prepare to ask for help, and accept that you can always turn around if you get off track. No one has all the answers, not even dads. I'm quickly finding out. Dads don't always have all the right answers, but that is okay. Accept that fact now, and you'll relieve yourself of some headache later on. You're going to get tired. There are times when it will not be easy. but that's okay. That is okay. Isaiah 40:29-31 tells us that you're going to get tired. Even young men and women will get tired, but God will lift you up on wings like eagles. So for the dads in the room, for Father's Day, for the moms in the room, Mother's Day was a month ago. We still love our moms.
Still applies.
You know, you get tired, God will lift you up. But when you do find those days where you stumble and fall, remember the previous steps. You've found places that you can gain nourishment and rest. You've identified people who can help support you. Hopefully you're in the right seat. Sometimes at a rest stop, you know, my brother and I would switch seats without telling the other and say, hey, too bad. You know, sometimes we try to trade seats with God or Jesus in a moment like that. Avoid that temptation.
You know what I liked about what you said, Nick? One of the first points was talking about, you know, where you get, how do you get your path? How do you get guided? And one thing that kind of resonated with me, I have a health issue. I have acid reflux and heartburn. Anybody else struggle with that? And Memorial Day weekend, we shipped our kids off to some of my wife's family, and we were just alone, us two. We're going to have a social gathering and just hang out and relax. And well, I ran out of my heartburn medicine. It's fine. I'll eat healthy. I'll eat clean. That typically keeps it under wraps. Well, you know, if anybody's a parent and has their kids out of town, you realize I don't have to cook. I'm not going to clean. So went out to eat, fast food, junk here, junk there, garbage in, garbage out. And by Monday morning, I felt like death. Like I was a hurting unit. And I made this realization, kind of like the rock bottom realization. It was like, if I would just put better stuff in, I'd feel a whole lot better of what I'm putting out. I think that's, you know, obviously earthly food, but the same for the spiritual food on the path is that, you know, by what you feed yourself, you know, spiritually, through scripture, through prayer, through small group, through worship, you're able to put out a better product. You're able to put out a better pathway on your walk with God.
You know, I agree with that. And, you know, Nick, you also touched on kind of the things that help you get to where you're going or you want to go and what you surround yourself with. You know, you talk about coming to church on Sunday mornings, like you're here today, a small group. That might be a thing where you surround yourself with people. You know, in business, they talk about, you know, if you're or sometimes in life, they say if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. You know, you want to...
You ever have that problem, Brad?
Yeah, never.
I'm
good at choosing who I surround myself with.
Brad, you're always in the right room is what you're saying?
Always in the right room.
He's a teacher.
Oh, boy. But no, you know, but you look at, because if you're the smartest person in the room, you're not learning anything. It's a lot that way in your walk. If you're finding yourself in the room with, you know, people that are not as far along in your walk, you want to find some people that are farther along in their walk so that you can learn from them. You can take from them tidbits that you can, you know, asking for their knowledge. It's just such a good thing. I know, Brad, in talking when we kind of sat down and talked about this, you said something about, you know, talk about you're the average of, you know, the 5 people around you, and that's a good way to kind of look at it. But, you know, I want to kind of hit back on, Nick, what you kind of said. You know, once you get on that road or on that path, you know, you have that GPS set on the final destination, which, you know, for our walk with God, that final destination is heaven. And, you know, once you get on that path, though, that's really, like Nick said and alluded to, that's really when life starts to throw curveballs at you. You would think, oh, it's going to get a whole lot easier. I just, you know, got on this walk with God, and everything's going to be smooth sailing, easy to go from here. And that, in reality, is probably further from the truth, because that's when things get hard. You get the temptations around you, things like that. But that's when you as a person really need to stay focused on, you know, when, you know, where you're going and what you're doing. And as fathers, this is a time we get a chance to really guide our kids and make sure that we are guiding them on the right path. Like Nick talked about, you know, it's kind of things you do and kids are watching. We know that they don't always listen as well, but they're watching you no matter what. So, you know, it's how are we truly guiding and leading our kids. Nick, you also talked about those maps. Brad, would you mind who remembers having to open this thing up when you went to go plan a trip and actually go, if you aren't raising your hand, you never have lived.
I still use them now.
But, you know, if you were to go and want to plan a trip like we used to plan our family trips, you would sit and you'd say, okay, I'm starting here, and I want to get over here, and you would actually have to go and look at roads, and you had to decide, okay, well, what's a highway, what's an interstate, what's a side road? You actually had to look and plan everything out. But the problem was is you also had to try and remember those roads so that you didn't.
It is hard to drive when you're looking at it like this.
Yeah, when you're looking at it like that, it's hard to to see those things. But it was a whole different thing. And now with the GPS, like Nick said, you go 0 to 60. You just type in that end coordinate. You say, okay, I want to go to this direction, and you type it in, and you say start route, and it just starts telling you, turn here, turn there. If you miss your turn, it says, at your next convenience, take a U-turn. I do that a lot because I try to ignore it. But, you don't have that you have that turn by turn when you have that GPS. You didn't have it before. It's a lot like our walk with Christ. We have a map. We have a guide if we want to use it in the Bible. The other thing, though, when you had to use the old map was you had to actually go and you said, okay, I'm going to get onto I-80. I'm going to turn on to, Highway 270 or whatever it may be. You actually had to, does anybody know what those big signs above the roads are when you're on the interstate? Those actually tell you what roads are coming up and what streets you're on. Anymore with our GPS units, we don't have to look at those. Well, you actually had to pay attention to those when you were driving before. Kind of a funny story on that one. Before the old GPS stuff, I like to think I know exactly where I'm going all the time. Carly and I had just gotten married, and we were going to Quad Cities, which for geographically that's eastern Iowa. We had just gotten our wedding pictures back, and we were going to head over there, and Carly was looking at them, and she kept kind of showing me some of the pictures, and we were, reminiscing about the wedding and how much fun it was and how great it was, our family and our friends, and pretty soon I looked up at one of those signs above the interstate, and it said, Sioux City, 5 miles. The few people that just realized that is the complete opposite direction of Quad Cities chuckled. That is heading north, and I was supposed to be headed east. I'm used to going to South Dakota all the time, and that's kind of the same way, except I forgot to make my turnoff. I actually stopped, grabbed a map, similar to one of these, and said, okay, I can either turn around, go back down I-29, and then get onto I-80 and head east, or I can use this handy map, and there's a highway, it goes straight across. Pay attention to speed limits, kind of like Nick said. When you go through Iowa especially, on those highways, they like to drop the speed limits, and the cops sit right on the other side of it, so they don't even give you a chance to slow down. Besides the fine I had to pay and mail in for a speeding ticket, we also took us what should have been a 5 or a 5.5 hour trip, ended up taking maybe 9 or so hours. Add in the police stop, and it took close to 10, but that's another story we'll save for another day. But I didn't have that GPS that was telling me, you missed your turn. Make a U-turn, get back on course. That's what we talk about in our spiritual walk, of having those people around you that are going to help you get turned around and get back on the right track. When you would go before GPS, and you had to just follow the directions you found, the world is full of billboards when it comes to taking a trip like that are, tempting you to get off of the exit. Speaking of that I-29, when you head up towards north and you get to about Sioux Falls, and once you get past it, if anyone's familiar with that, you see 8 million signs for the Corn Palace in Mitchell, South Dakota. Skip it. It's not worth making a stop. It's one of those things that you learn, later on. But, there's all those things. It might be signs that say ice cream and malts or soda at the next stop, or, Chick-fil-A for many people that are familiar with that. I know lots of people do that. But you see these signs and you get off of the road. When we're going with our walk with Christ, the world does the same thing. But it's in different forms. It's not the billboards that say exit here. For our kids, thinking about parents in the room and, fathers being Father's Day, our kids, as they get older, it might be that time they go and they get invited to a party and they get tempted with drinking alcohol or trying drugs, or, maybe they have some friends that have been doing that, and it's the choice of riding with them or not in a vehicle. Those are things that might really get us off path. Or maybe as a parent, that temptation is you have a job and you get offered a promotion, and that promotion offers you more money, a greater title, but it also comes with more time at work, more time away from your kids, more travel. You have to look at, is that a benefit in life and where I'm trying to go, or is that something that's going to kind of take me off course? The key being that we have to look at what things are part of our indirect path on our walk with God. Like Nick, you said, kind of going, and it's not just a point A to point B. There's things along the way, and we have to decide what things along the way are those things that God wants us to experience and what things are actually pulling us away from God. When we would go on those camping trips, you had the station wagon. We started off we would take the tent and ride in the van, and then we started getting like the campers, and we had that thing of where to sit. Dad would be driving, my mom would be in the passenger seat, myself and my brother, and this was before you had to wear the seatbelts in the back, but law enforcement, probably not a good idea to talk about. But we would go, and we started getting these campers, and pretty soon my brother and I were riding in the camper that was pulling behind while my parents were driving. I thought that was really cool at the time, and now with having my own kids, I realized that was a really smart idea, because they can whine and cry as much as you want, and they aren't going to get anything, because, better figure it out in a hurry. But, when you were doing that, there were lots of detours. I thought at the time, growing up, that it was just the little things. There's still a place that we'll stop when we go to South Dakota. It's 2 miles off the road, but they've got great burgers and shakes, and we'll stop there. It's a super small town. You get off, I think the burger shop is the population of the town when it's there. But you have things like that, or if you're driving across Nebraska, you may go a couple miles off the road to stop at Ole's to eat. Things like that I thought were just, we're seeing a sign for it, we're going to get off. But really, you kind of had those things mapped out. And before we had the GPS and online reviews of things, you were trying to figure out where to stop and where to go. So you relied on those billboards, and sometimes they were not things that were beneficial for your trip. You kind of regretted making that stop. Just like things in life, sometimes you are tempted by something, you think it sounds great, and you end up regretting that decision as it's not fulfilling that walk and that journey with God. So really what we have to do is we have to look at and decide what things are helping us in our walk with God, helping us stay true to that course, and what things are pulling us down. So it's really who or what are we following? If you're following God, you're on the right path. But if you seem to be finding yourself getting off course a lot and having to make a U-turn, turn back around a lot, maybe you need to upgrade your GPS. And that can be done in the things like find who you surround yourself with in a small group, or the friends that you associate with, and things like that what you're feeding yourself, like Brad alluded to. What are you feeding yourself? Maybe you need to upgrade that. 1 John 5 verse 21 says, "Dear children, keep away from anything that might take God's place in your hearts."
The thing I like a lot to think of at that, not the least of which you and your brother riding in the camper, swaying back and forth in the back. When Jesus wants to take the wheel, I don't think he wants you to go that far back. But the sense of autopilot is something that I really thought of when I was listening to you. When you use the GPS, I think it's easy to get on that autopilot. You just turn it on, you just listen for that little voice, and off you go. And as a result, you can get distracted more easily. I think of my daughter. She loves a particular CD, and it always has to be in the car. And the song is always "If You're Happy and You Know It." And we listen to it over and over and over again until I realize I've dropped her off. I'm halfway to work.
I am. Every parent has done that.
Happy and clap your hands. So if you drive down 370 any morning and you see me clapping my hands or nodding my head, or at the same time, it's because I'm listening to that and I don't realize Claire's not with me. But, I think of that with our walk as well. It's easy to get on autopilot, like, okay, I'm a Christian now, and so I just go to church and maybe do my small group and this and that, and don't really intentionally spend that time in the Word or spend that time with other believers. And I think it's easy to get on autopilot there as well, and you start to not focus on what you should be doing with following Christ. You just start doing random things.
And if you do find yourself caught on a detour between Sioux City and Quad Cities,
Thank you for referring to that as a detour.
You know, the good news is in your personal and spiritual detours, the return trip, the detour, doesn't have to take as long. Two stories in the Bible, one that Craig references a lot. The story of the prodigal son, when Jesus is talking about this lesson, when the son finally returns, it's the father goes and he runs and meets him. He's so excited for his child to be back that he goes out and meets him. And then that's referred to in the Old Testament, Deuteronomy chapter 30. It says, even if you've been banished to the most distant land under the heavens, from there the Lord your God will gather you and bring you back. There's a lay version that you might have heard more often. It's that even if you're 1,000 steps away from God, he's always one step back because he will meet you. He will go 99% of the way. All you have to do is basically make that U-turn and come back. Doesn't work on the road to Quad Cities. It does work in your spiritual walks. If you find yourself in some type of detour of your life, just be reassured it's really only one step back.
If you figure out how to make that happen on road trips, you'd be
I'll
rich.
let you know. Patent pending. I'm going to return to verse 31 of the verse that was read today, and it's Paul's writing to the Corinthians. Just as kind of, how do I know I'm doing it right? How do I know I'm on the right path, that I'm not stuck on autopilot? And Paul says, basically, whatever you do, do it for God. And when he writes into the letter of Colossians, chapter 3, he adds an extra phrase in there. Whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord. Because word and deed is important as a parent, and even if you're not a parent, a lot of these still apply. But I'm going to show you my what's the bird they put in the mines to make sure there's no poison? Canaries?
I think it's canary. Yeah.
Canary. I have my own little canary test to make sure I'm walking. It's my children. So here are my three: Lennon, Amelia, and Porter's on the right. Like Nick, you've
got Connor and Caitlin in the back, and then Claire in front.
And there's mine. You've got Brent on the left and Zeke on the right.
And I don't know for you, and it's probably true, and all the other parents can probably agree, is that, my word or deed, they make it pretty obvious if I'm not doing what's right. Especially, here's a story about Lennon. When she's a kind of a bossy, she likes to be policed from other kids, and so she'll always tell on them and rat on them, Porter's not eating. And so my go-to response was, Lenny, you just worry about Lennon, and then let Mommy and Daddy worry about Porter. Well, then she was misbehaving, and I just said that, trying to teach her respect and boundaries and everything, and then she threw that back in my face one day when she was misbehaving. I said, Lennon, you need to, I don't even know what it was, and she said, Daddy, you just worry about yourself. And I said, whoa, and my wife's like, you say that? I'm like, yeah, but that's not what I mean. And so something that I hear a lot, and it's, Dave Ramsey says it, and it's, I think, more is caught than taught. So my behaviors that I give are more, or speak louder than the actions, than the words that I'm giving. Whether I tell my children not to do something, if it doesn't match what I'm actually acting, it's hard. It's, the message is lost, especially for young kids. Back to that verse, whatever I do in word or deed, it's amazing that, as I struggle, when I look at my kids, I want to do the best for them. I want to be the best for them. I want them to have the best opportunity. I want to be the best father and husband and teacher and everything. It's funny that if I would just follow his advice, Paul's advice to Colossians and Paul's advice to the Corinthians, if I just made God my focus, my number one priority, if I did everything for his glory, it's amazing, coincidence, probably not the right word, that when I do what's best for God, it's also what's best for me and my kids. St. Francis of Assisi, a saint from many years ago, he says it another way that I really like, and you probably heard this too. Preach the gospel at all times. When necessary, use words. And his point being is that your walk with God should radiate your Christianity. The actions you do, not just the words you say, are louder to your kids, are louder to your friends and family. They're louder than sometimes a word you use. So using your behaviors to teach. And that's, again, when you're doing it in word or deed, if you're doing it in the name of the Lord, you're probably on the right track. And back to what both Nick and Mike had said, if you're really struggling, Paul gives some advice here too. In the last verse that we read earlier, 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 1, he says, follow me as I am following Christ. He's saying, if you don't have an example of how to live a Christ-like, I am trying to live one. Just learn from me. And that could seem kind of counterintuitive, like he's kind of placing himself. He's saying, no, I've been there. You know what I've done. And look, God still loves me. I still have a walk. And I'm going to encourage you. So Paul is seeking you out. And he says this to Timothy in the New Testament. He says it in a lot of the letters. He says, find a strong mentor. Find somebody who's been there before. If you're struggling at work, find somebody who's in a similar business or similar position as you. If you're struggling as a husband or a wife, then find another couple who has a strong marriage. And one of the best things that Craig had us do before my wife and I got married, they had us meet with another couple for marriage mentoring. And it was, are they a perfect couple? No, but it was, they were a perfect model for us on how to be a Christ-honoring couple. Shark Tank fans?
Never seen it.
Here's a real life example.
Very, very, very much.
You're a big fan. Well, I don't remember. I watch it in passing. I don't. 3 kids. I don't get to focus on TV a lot until I go to bed. But one thing that somebody with a product had said. It said, "I'm not just here to get your investment. I'm also here to get your understanding, your mentoring, your talent. You've all been there. They're sitting in front of 4 billionaires, 4 entrepreneurs, 5, and then there's even ones who are not. There's like 6 or 7 on the show. He says, "I'm here, teach me." And so that's kind of the attitude we need to do, is we need to seek out somebody. And it's true for if you're a parent, coworker, if you have siblings, friend relationship, surround yourself in small group or at the church. Seek out somebody who's been there in a situation and who's done it right, and maybe they'll be able to help you be a Paul for you. Imitate me as I am imitating Christ. Let me be your example. So that'd be Paul's challenge, and then our challenge for all of you out there is if there is something you're struggling with a detour, go seek out somebody who's dealt with that before and get some Christ-centered advice.
It's good that you say that, Brad, and you talk about, seeking somebody out. Sometimes I know for people to go and think about, okay, well, I'm going to go seek them out and ask them for their advice. It's a intimidating thing to do. But chances are that person that you're seeking out, because especially in their walk with Christ, if you're seeing them as a good mentor and model to follow, they at some point have probably seeked out somebody else's advice. So don't be afraid to ask them, I need your help. Can you help guide me? I'm struggling with this. Because chances are they would be honored to be asked even, and like I said, they've probably been in the same shoes that you are, so think that when you are feeling maybe afraid to ask.
Yeah, I mean, it's perfect timing today. Jill and we all welcomed some new members to the church, not only here at the 10:30 service, but also at 9 o'clock. And one of the things that Jill said was, these new members coming in, they have a lot that they can share with the Water's Edge, and the Water's Edge is a lot that we can share with them and everyone who attends. And I think it's just another great example is, we are all here to help each other. We are not in this alone. God calls us to live in community and not try to figure this thing called life out by ourselves. So I so appreciate that, because that's something I struggle with, is I feel like, well, I'm going to be a burden if I ask this person for help. They're so busy anyway. I just don't want to add one more thing to their plate. But I guarantee every person I've asked it's been an unqualified yes immediately. They've never said, well, I think I've got time on this day. It's been, yes, how can I help you? And also, I mean, for me, it's all about something earlier you talked about, our actions and our behavior. Paul said it, Francis said it, but it's really more of not just do as I say, as a father, as a parent. It's do as I do is what they're saying. God and Christ and Paul, do as I do, not just as I say, because those actions will definitely get captured.
All right, so I'm going to close this out really quick. So as you prepare for your path, as you leave here, just make sure you're surrounding yourself with the right group of people. Through small group, if you're not involved, we encourage you to get plugged one in as we approach the new school year and the new small group season. Make sure you're consuming the right things, scripturally, prayer in your prayer life, and of course, the natural transition in your body so you can be here forever and ever. Enjoy the God-provided detours. Enjoy, not putting yourself on cruise control and find them, but also try to avoid the distractions. People will seek to get you off track. If you know that they know you have a strong Christian faith. Some people take joy in trying to get people off their walk. And use your canary. What's going to make sure? How do you know you're doing something right? If you can tell you're doing it for God's glory. So I'm going to close this out in prayer.